For what purpose does Mr. Gohmert seek recognition?
Time, Ms. Porter.
To strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Yeah, thank you. And there was a distinction made in opinion that was quoted a moment ago about sporting characteristics as opposed to assault weapon characteristics. Look, I look at the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. There is no mention of sporting weapons, that you can only have a weapon that is sporting. During my years on the bench, I've said before, I don't remember anybody that legally obtained a gun through a sporting goods store or firearms, licensed firearms. So they would either steal them or buy them from somebody that stole them or got them through some illegal means. But with regard to the courts are going to either have to throw out the Constitution and entirely throw out the Second Amendment if they're going to be making distinctions by using sporting guns versus assault weapons, because every knife, every gun, every firearm of any nature can be an assault weapon. It's just the case. One case was 11-inch long knife. That was the assault weapon, even though it was 99.9% of the time used to cut meat. So let's get back to the Constitution, because I think the Supreme Court is starting to do that more than they have in the past. And so I think we can expect that for the future. But there is no distinction in the Constitution in the Second Amendment. So I would think, and I know I've heard in prior debate recently, gee, we don't want to hear anything about the causes, about fatherlessness, even though there's plenty of study done, information to show there is a correlation between fatherlessness and violence. We're not nearly as religious a people as we once were. We're not following morals that once existed, that were taught in school. We got rid of the 10 Commandments, so children don't hear anymore that thou shalt not murder. And going back to John Adams, as he said, this Constitution is intended for religious and moral people. It's wholly inadequate for the governing of any other. If we're not going to get back to teaching morals, and that includes parents teaching morals, school teaching morals, then we will have to get rid of most of our Constitution. It doesn't work. I don't want to do that. I want to keep the Constitution. We have always had guns. If we had not had guns and firearms in America, there would be no America as we know it. That's what got us the most free country in history, much freer than Canada and Australia or any other you can point to. But the only way we're going to keep it is if we get back to teaching basics, that there are some fundamental moral rights and some fundamental moral wrongs. And if we're not going to address those, then you might as well address obesity by banning spoons, because spoons make people fat the same way guns kill people. It's not the spoon, it's not the gun in the two different areas of eating and shooting. You've got to look at the shooter. That is the bottom line. And there's plenty of information, and my friends across the aisle really care to get down to brass tacks about what is causing these mass shootings. We've always had guns. We hadn't always had these kind of mass shootings. So in the meantime, the AR, I have found that women I've worked with on the issue over the years, they like the AR because it's easier for them to handle. If somebody invades the home, it's easier for them, better than a shotgun, really. And you're going to make it as hard as possible for somebody who is not strong to defend their home. I think that's a mistake, and I support the amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For our purposes, gentleman from California seek recognition.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
This debate is about, once and for all, banning assault weapons in America. And the last Republican to speak said that if we do not have guns in America, we will not have America as we know it. Well, the America that we know today means that if you're a kid, you're afraid in your school. And in too many schools, you have seen your fellow students gunned down and killed. If you're a parishioner, you're afraid in your synagogue, your mosque, and your church. If you like country music, you're afraid to go to a country music festival because the last major festival, over 50 people died in Nevada. If you go to the mall, you're afraid to go to the mall because our malls are constantly shot up, just like the Greenwood Plaza Mall in Indiana over the weekend. There's no place that is safe in America today from gun violence, and there's no place that is safe from the most destructive firearm in the arsenal, which is an assault weapon. So when the last speaker says, if we don't have guns, we will lose the America as we know it, I don't think anyone wants to know an America where we constantly live in fear. I've also listened to the arguments that there should be no restrictions on firearms. And what if we had a tyrannical government? Wouldn't we need those firearms? Well, I challenge my colleagues across the aisle. Go to your local car dealership. Go there this weekend and tell them that you want to buy an M1 Abrams tank. After all, it's your right to defend yourself with an M1 Abrams tank. The dealer's going to look at you like you have three heads, and he's going to say, we have restrictions on the type of weapons that people can own in America, sir. We have restrictions on the weapons people can own in America for good reason. I've heard the excuses of why we shouldn't be doing this legislation. They are lack of religion in America. We should focus on having more religion. Mental health issues. Fatherlessness in America. But we should force pregnancies on people. That's a separate issue. Opioids, video games, and of course, unlocked doors. Well, if you have all of these issues, and if I was to accept that these are all issues, why in the world would you want to throw into that mix unlimited, unrestricted access to assault weapons? I actually believe that we could do more about mental health, and we could do more about fatherlessness. We can do more about opioids. We could do more to harden and protect our kids at their schools. But that doesn't mean we do nothing about a country that has unrestricted access to firearms. Also, as it relates to all of those issues, one of the Parkland survivors just messaged me and told me it wasn't the opioids, it wasn't mental illness, it wasn't immigrants that killed my classmates, or a criminal mastermind with deep connections to the black market who killed my classmates. It was a 19-year-old white nationalist who legally obtained an AR-15. Too many of us have seen our communities victimized by gun violence. Too many of our colleagues have gone into the well of the House for a moment of silence because people in their communities were killed by assault rifles. And I hope that never happens to anyone across the aisle. I hope it never happens. I pray it never happens. But because of your inaction on this issue, it likely will happen again. And one of you may see in your district massive loss of life at the hands of someone using an assault rifle. And I promise you this, if that happens, when you go and meet with the grieving family, a mother, at least one mother, will look at you and say, Congressman, what did you do in the House of Representatives when they tried to take and ban the weapons that were used that killed my daughter? Were you on the side of limiting access to those weapons, or did you do all you could to make sure that the killer had the ability to use it on my daughter? Think about that. I hope you never have to answer that question. But if you continue to show inaction on this issue, you will. And we will all have to live with your answer for the rest of our lives. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. If no one else seeks recognition, we're prepared to vote on the amendment. The question occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Recorded vote is requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Nadler.
No.
Mr. Nadler votes no. Ms. Lofgren.
No.
Ms. Lofgren votes no. Ms. Jackson-Lee. Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson of Georgia.
No.
Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes no. Mr. Deutsch.